Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. Welcome back for another episode of the Estranged Heart podcast. I'm so glad you've decided to join us. A couple of announcements before we dive into today's episode. The last cohort of support groups just ended last week, and as always, it was bittersweet for myself as well as each participant of the group, for each of those groups, because it's a time of 8 weeks that is spent together supporting one another, learning more about ourselves, and growing and evolving. And every one of those members show up with vulnerability and accountability and questions and deep compassion. And that is what makes these support groups just so unbelievably amazing. If you're interested in joining the next cohort of support groups, please let me know. You can send an email to theestrangedheart@gmail.com. These groups run for 8 weeks. We meet one time per week for an hour and a half. And these groups are for estranged moms, recently reconciled moms, and estranged adult children. So if you're wanting to join one of these groups, again, please reach out via email and let me know. I'm happy to get you on the list to send out for the informational email, which will go out either this evening or by midweek next week. And would love to see you in the next group. These groups are really transformative for everyone, and including myself. I learned something. I show up with a curious mindset as I teach in this podcast. I teach in my coaching, and I'm always learning new and different things from different participants within these groups. And that's what happens for the participants. So we're all learning and growing and evolving together. It's just beautiful. I am seeking stories from estranged moms and or recently reconciled moms. So if that is something you would like to share on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. We can have a discussion about whether or not your story is a match for this podcast. And if so, then we would plan accordingly to get that information recorded and shared on the podcast. Alternately, if you do not wish to have your voice recorded and you would still like to share your story, you're able to do that by sending me an email, and we can meet. I can take notes and then share it on your behalf, or you could send me a letter that you would like to have shared. So there are options for that. I think it's important. While I can share my experience as a formerly estranged mom and now reconciled mom, and as a formerly estranged adult child and now reconciled adult child, I can share my experiences, but other people want to hear from other people, right? You guys get tired of hearing my story. So if you're open to that, if you feel like you're able to, I understand that there are challenges for a lot of people in sharing their story, especially if they're still currently estranged. There's a fear that the adult child and or a parent, for the kids, may hear their story and it cause difficulty in the relationship. I get that. I also would challenge you to get curious around that and see what else you might learn about yourself around that story that we're telling ourselves. So anyway, if you'd like to share your story or have your story shared on the podcast, please email me. Again, new and different things are coming in the fall, and I'm so excited about that. Please keep an eye and an ear out for that. There will be social media posts that will come through for that, and I'll be announcing some things here on the podcast as well. But please, yeah, just keep your eyes and ears open for that. And I am currently working from a wait list now for coaching clients. I anticipate having a couple of openings in September. And so if you're interested in that, having one on one coaching, please feel free to email me, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. So, on to today's episode. Today's episode is titled, How Can My Estranged Adult Child Be So Heartless? And this title and what I will talk about today came about after years of me being in estranged parent groups, having a group of my own, through coaching clients, through having support groups of my own, and hearing this over and over and over and over again from estranged parents. And one thing that I find across the board, again, I've been watching patterns. I've been watching and reading and listening to words that are used. And I know that I've talked before about words and labels in other episodes. And if you haven't heard those episodes, please go back and do a search. You can do a search on my website for those specific podcast episodes. But when I am doing what I call research and being able to observe and listen to what parents are saying, and I'm able to also come at it from a place of curiosity versus defensiveness. And what I find time after time after time is when parents use labels such as heartless and cruel and all the things that are being said about adult children who elect to go no contact, um, is that these are parents who um, find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to heal, and therefore they remain stuck in the hurt and the pain. And I know that that's where those words are coming from. However, our children have a different take on that. And so I wanted to address that today. I also want to say, just as a caveat, I know that this episode is we will be talking mainly to parents about this, but I think if you're an adult child listening, I think the same thing applies to you, and perhaps I'll do an episode on that for estranged adult children. In that, when we use words and labels to describe a parent, that's the view through which we see them, and then it kind of becomes a self uh, fulfilling prophecy, if you will, that that is who that parent then acts like. They take on the labels and the words, and so then we're just in this vicious circle. So anyway, I wanted to say that this really can apply to both sides, but today I am speaking to the parents. So um, and I think that another important piece to say too, right up front, is for most people, a large part of this pertains to where you are on your estrangement journey. So, what I typically find is that parents go through, they go through the grieving process when their children estrange from them. And as we know, in the grieving process, there's different stages, right? There's sadness and there's denial and um, there's anger, and then, there's begging and, you know, bargaining and all of these things that come about through the the grief process. And in the beginning, there's that sadness and the heartbreak, and then we'd typically move into a place of anger. And it is in that anger phase that we tend to see parents who are, in essence, attacking the adult child. They're ungrateful, they're cruel, they're heartless, um, they have no feelings. I mean, just all of the things. And all of that is coming from a this deep place of hurt that the parent is feeling. I want to challenge you, if you're listening to this episode, I want to challenge your perception and explore what might, as I talk often about what's going on beneath the surface, right? That I don't think that things are as black and white as we want them to be. Mm. And I would even say maybe as much as we need them to be on some level, right? So that label, heartless, cruel, what have you, is a reaction to the deep pain and betrayal that a parent feels. It's, for most parents, seems to come out of the blue. They do not have an understanding of why the estrangement has happened, why their kid won't talk to them. Um, and a large part of what I do in my coaching practice is to help educate the parent on what has happened and why their child is estranging from them or has estranged from them. So let's talk about how labels can be defense mechanisms, right? When we are overwhelmed, our nervous system is all dysregulated. We are trying to make sense out of something that seemingly doesn't make sense. And so we create defense mechanisms. We create something that, to help our mind grasp and understand what is happening in our world when we don't understand, when nothing makes sense. So we're grasping at anything on the surface to just please make it make sense. We're there, we're crying and sobbing every day, and we can't get our self together, and just all the things. And so we're like, just give me something that makes this make sense. And we go to, well, anyone who would care about someone would not do these things. So then we go to the complete opposite, saying, well, they don't care. That's the only reason that this could be happening, is that they just don't give a shit about me. And I'm here to say that's not true. But it's our way of trying in the moment to make sense of something that seemingly has no sense to it. Um, I did this with my kids, right? I thought they were entitled brats, and they didn't, they were just being ridiculous and heartless, that they did not care about me or my feelings. And I have a vastly different perspective on that today, right? But in that moment, in those moments of my world being upside down, of everything that I thought I knew to be true was in fact not true. I had to find a way to start to be able to turn my world side back, back right side up again. And again, the only way that on the surface that I could do that was to say, well, they just don't care, right? Made it very black and white. And no relationship is black and white, period. Humans Their psychology is not black and white. There is no way that what we do can be black and white. And when we try to shove that round peg into a square hole, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, that being said, again, I want to validate the parents who feel this way, right? Your feelings of being in pain, feeling anger and frustration, all of that is very real. And those emotions can also cloud our judgment and lead to labels that are not only inaccurate, but also harmful. In your effort to defend yourself, to put up defenses and to make, seemingly simplistic explanations for something that is anything but simple, we can step into a place where our words become very harmful. And I'll explain more on that in just a moment. So, words such as heartless, um, it solidifies these these negative narratives, right? We're not able to see any sort of anything positive or loving or vulnerable when we stand in the place of negativity and a place of not being curious. Okay. And when we're in that place, all of those things can widen this emotional gap that has already occurred between the parent and the adult child. So we're making it further and further apart, right? When you go into that place of my child as being heartless, it's pushing you further and further away from your child. And again, it's that defense mechanism, right? It's trying to prevent you from being hurt again. And I'm here to tell you that if you love anything in this world, one of the side effects of loving is hurting at some point in your life, at some point in the relationship. That's just how love works. Because you are human, things will hurt at some point in time. Now, do we throw in the towel because of that? One time, I would say no. Okay. When I talk about labels being, when I mentioned this earlier for adult children, in that words and labels can become self-fulfilling prophecies. Um, it, the same thing applies for parents. If you are, and I talk about this with my clients and in support groups, when you label your child with something, that is the perspective you have of them. That is the lens through which you view them. So if you say my child is a difficult has always that kid, she's always been so difficult. She's just always angry and she's always this and she's always that. Well, guess what? That's how you are going to see her. As always difficult, always angry, always unable to please. And instead, when we can have curiosity, we begin to change that narrative. We begin to change the view. We begin to change the perspective. It's that little bitty quarter turn kind of thing that I talk about. Um, when we use labels that are negative in nature, it also limits our capacity for compassion and understanding. And when we don't have those things, compassion and understanding, we build defense walls, and that remains in place instead of there being a bridge. How do we get from this side to the other side? How do we get from estrangement to reconciliation? And we're not able to do that when we're walking around pointing fingers and labeling people. Adult children tend to do this with their parents and calling them toxic and narcissistic. When we're talking and about those labels in relation to a person you have a relationship with, whether you want to have that relationship or not, whether you're actively engaged in that relationship or not, that is the lens through which you are viewing them. And you will continue to view them through that lens in that way and capacity, regardless of what they do to change. Remember that people can change. I am living proof of this. I have clients that are living proof of this. And I have clients who are living proof of this, have done the work, have made the changes, and have children who refuse to entertain that they have changed. And it's my belief they have these walls put up to defend themselves. Again, I get it because of their own pain, right? They don't want to be hurt again by a parent. And they're going based off of previous years of experience, just as parents do with years of experience with a child. And they're making an assumption that isn't necessarily correct in the here and now. So we're building walls instead of bridges. Okay. Um, I would encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast, to try to develop an awareness around the words and labels that you speak. So catching yourself when you default to labels and consider what's underneath that, right? And one question that you may want to ask yourself is it my pain that is speaking? Okay? You're frustrated, you're hot, you're tired, you're aggravated, you want to get home, and the person in front of you is not going as fast as you would like for them to go. And so you lay on the horn, or you flip them the bird, or you're in your car cussing them, calling them everything but what they are. There is a bit of pain beneath that. It's saying, I'm hot, I'm tired, I just want to go. Get out of my way. That's a very simplistic example. So, how do we shift our perspective? How do we go from having pain and fear driving our behavior into something else, right? Um, our children are not heartless. Let me say that again. Our children are not heartless. They are in pain. They are hurting. I could say the same thing about you as a parent. When you are using negative labels to describe your adult child, you are not a heartless person. You are not heartless. You are in pain. People do the things they do for a reason. It's not about a lack of heart. It's not about a lack of care. Instead, it's a reaction to an unresolved hurt, unmet need, or fear. I want you to just stop for a second and ask yourself this. Do I have an unresolved hurt, unmet need, or fear when I am calling my child heartless? And then I want you to ask yourself the same question. Do I have unresolved hurt, unmet needs, or fear when I am calling my child loving and kind names? I really want you to ask yourself that question. Emotional immaturity and trauma and miscommunications, which generally come as a result of emotional immaturity and trauma, can drive behavior that looks cold and distant. Again, there's a reason why people do what they do or don't do what they don't do. Um, yeah, I just, I think back to the years when I was this angry child, I was an angry woman, I was an angry mother, and I think about what why was I that way? For so many years, I thought, well, surely that's quote unquote, that's just the way that I am. And that was so not the case. It wasn't until I got myself into therapy that I began to understand how we become who we are today. And it's a result of our past lived experiences. Okay, I would like to suggest a couple of exercises, practices, if you will, um, to help you to begin to move out of using words and labels that are damaging. This is another piece, and I believe it was Brene Brown who she's done a YouTube video of this, I believe, where she talks about when we begin to other someone, meaning us versus them. They are different than me. They are heartless. I am not. Those types of things. That is how we begin to dehumanize people. And that is what allows, when you think about the Holocaust, it allows people to begin to do different, very harmful and criminal and horrific things to human beings when we begin to other them. They are different than me. They are this, that, or the other thing. Labels do that. And labels can have very tragic outcomes and results. So a couple of things to potentially do and try to begin to move away from using labels if you have found that you use labels and maybe you're not even aware that you do. right? It's not until we have an awareness that we can understand, oh gosh, I use this word all the time. Maybe I want to figure out why I use it. And that is from having an awareness. So we have to become, we have to, we have to stop and think about what are the words that I'm using, right? And that's to be in the present moment. When we're worried about the past and we're worried about the future, we're not in the present moment. We're not recognizing what is happening in the here and now. So get yourself in the here and now and begin to have an awareness around the words that you use on a daily basis. Huh, isn't that interesting? I always, and here's one that I see often with estranged moms. Oh my gosh, that was so stupid of me to do that. Oh, how could I be so stupid? You're not stupid. You may not know something. You may need to learn something. You may not have had an awareness around something, but you're not stupid. But it's things like that. When you can begin to notice that, oh my gosh, every time I try something new and I fail, I call myself stupid. Okay, so put stupid on a piece of paper that's like, okay, this is a word that I use all the time. It's a negative word. Why am I using this? And begin to ask yourself and dig deeper and deeper with that. Journal on these thoughts that you may have after having listened to this episode. Reflect on the conversations that you've had. Reflect on things that people have told you. Reflect on your thoughts. Ugh, every time I see that person, I think, man, she is just a piece of work. Well, some people would say a piece of work isn't necessarily negative. I'd beg to differ, right? Why do we say that? Where's that coming from? What are we uncomfortable with? Okay. We want to shift from the harsh labels and words into more neutral and then eventually, hopefully, compassionate language that can help to open up a place of understanding and then healing. We can't heal what we don't have an awareness around and don't have an understanding of. Um, I am going to ask that you approach your adult child's behavior with curiosity rather than judgment and ask yourself, what might they be experiencing that I can't see or that I have no knowledge of? Okay. Focus on the why behind the behavior. Okay. um, Reasons that are driving your child to do the things they do or not do the things they don't do, even if in that realization and awareness comes about that's painful or uncomfortable, we have to have an awareness before we can do anything different. And then that focus on language awareness, right? Instead of saying heartless, consider maybe something like, they are hurting and I don't fully understand why. I don't know about you, but I would much rather someone say when they were frustrated with me, upset with me, mad at me, or what have you, to say, instead of saying that I am heartless, I would much rather them say, oh my gosh, she's got to be hurting and I don't understand why. What would you rather someone say about you? I Here in closing, I want to recognize that this is hard work. It's hard when you've gone, 5, 6, 7, 8 decades utilizing one form of language, one way of using labels and your day-to-day talk and way of communicating in the world. It's hard to change that. And I'm here to tell you it's not impossible. It is difficult. It does require an awareness. It requires work. It requires thinking about things and not just doing it because it's the way it's always been done. It requires that you get off autopilot and be present and aware in the here and now in your life today. Um, it requires patience. It requires um, obviously self awareness, but it also requires a willingness to see things differently. If you are committed to seeing your child as heartless, then you're not going to change anything. If you hold steadfast to that commitment, then that's what's going to be in your world. And I'm here to tell you there is another way. And I know that your adult child is begging for you to entertain a different way. No one wants to be thought of or called heartless or toxic or entitled or all the other labels that we use in the world of estrangement and no contact. Okay. Um, I hope that you can consider shifting your perspective and language so you can move from hurtful um, words and labels um, and move into a space where you can use words and labels for healing and whether or not reconciliation happens, right? If you only do that to become reconciled with your adult child's going to know that. They're going to know that your behavior isn't a base level foundational change for you. They're going to know it's temporary and it's just a method of, in essence, manipulation just to get you back, get your child back. So I'm asking you to consider and being open to changing the way that you communicate about your child and to your child. Have compassionate curiosity. And I believe wholeheartedly because I've seen it with myself, I've seen it with my clients, I've seen it with other people. When you begin to change and move from the negative, hateful side of life into first a space of just curiosity, you can get into that space of curiosity and you don't have to change, right? So I see it like a scale. You can be on this far one side that is hateful and harsh and all of those negative words and labels. And then on the other side is compassion and understanding and empathy. And in between those two is a space for curiosity. So even if you just move into that space of curiosity before going into the other side, you can sit in that space and you get the choice to then make, oh no, I'm not comfortable with this and I'm going to go back to the space where I was. Or you can say, okay, this curiosity, I want it to lead me to a place where I can build a bridge to my child instead of putting another stone on the wall between us. So I believe I will leave it there for now. If you would like support around this, trying to learn a different way of talking and communicating, please reach out. If you'd like one on one coaching or you would like to join one of the support groups, this is a topic that we cover in the support groups. please reach out to theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Again, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.